Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Dharma Devi and we're very blessed and happy to have Padma with us from Ananda South Bay. So today's reading from Rays from the One Light weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week is on how high should we aspire? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The passage this week is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. The easiest explanation for these words is that they were spoken in criticism of the scribes and Pharisees, particularly since Jesus was often verbally attacked by them and stood up to them fearlessly. However, it wouldn't have been much of a challenge to the disciples who aspired to spiritual perfection to tell them, don't be like those who lack any such aspiration. Jesus, in fact, says only a few verses later, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. What Jesus was referring to here then was the self-righteousness of the priests. Don't seek perfection, he was saying to his disciples, in the image you project toward others. Don't be satisfied with a goodness born merely of ego definitions. The highest virtue is to transcend the very thought of personal virtue in the realization of God alone as the doer. Before this realization, even the thought, I am kind or I am truthful, is self-limiting. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 7th chapter, yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, the man who saith, all is Vasudev. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
And this is a reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda. Keep the compass needle of my attention ever pointing toward thee. Whether soaring through the sky encased in a steel air cage, or drawn over the land by snorting iron steeds, or moving easily over smooth highways on rubber wheels, or having my very thoughts paralyzed by the pounding din of assembly lines, the compass needle of my attention will ever keep turning toward thy magnetic north pole of divine love. Beaten by winds of happenstance, drenched by cloudbursts of misery, sucked down in the mud of soul enmeshing, ego-whipped activity, or wandering, lost in jungles of confusion, my mind will yet ever reach out for thy guiding touch. The raft of my life, tossed about helplessly by the driving storms of need, was drifting toward rocks of insatiable desire. O pole star in our wisdom skies, thy twinkling light beckoned and directed me toward thy shores of eternal contentment. Though countless mechanisms pound, twist, or stretch my anguished nerves, yet will the homing pigeon of my love wing its way peacefully towards its true home in thee. Good morning, everyone. As Dharma Devi introduced me, I am Padma, and I live closer to the South Bay Center, and that's why I often go there, and I try to come here, and it's such a joy to be here, to be with all of you this morning. So our topic today is how high should we aspire? You know, I'm sure a lot of you must be knowing this. A couple of years back, Swami Kriyananda was asked this question, Swamiji, what is the essence of the spiritual path, if you could just give us, in a very short sentence. And he said, the essence of the spiritual path is just transcending of the ego, which means just killing of the ego. And sounds simple, just killing of the ego. But it is not, as we know that. And the ego keeps coming back, just keep coming back. And so this whole spiritual path, and I'm sure I'm speaking for all of you here, the spiritual journey that we have come upon is the journey of this little self-love. What is ego? Ego is loving the self, this self with a little s. And then the journey of this self-love to the self-love. And this time the self is a big S. It's the spirit, love of the spirit, love of God, love of Satchidananda, whatever way you want to call him. How do we achieve that? There are two kinds of people in this world, and when I say this, I know that people say there are two kinds of people in the world. One that says there are two kinds of people, and the others that say they don't think of that. But with that hazard, I still say there are two kinds of people. I was thinking about this the other day, and I felt, yes, there are these two basic kind of people in the world. One, we say worldly people for now, and the other, the devotee, who's seeking something else. And what's the difference? A very simple difference. We are all the same, but the basic difference, I would say, is the worldly people have not yet started loving God. Yet. And I use that word yet with a lot of stress on it, because it's our destiny. We will. And the devotee, by the grace of God, by the virtue of maybe good work, previous good karma, have turned their self and they have just started to love God. And that is a huge difference. It makes so much difference in our lives. I am a teacher myself. I teach high school. I have two little kids who go to public schools. And in my school, I'm really happy to see, very recently, the last 2 years, they've started these pillars of excellence, they call it. And then they're teaching patience, respectfulness, really good virtues, truthfulness, honesty, integrity, on all this. And it's really good. We take up one topic every month, and we try to instill that as much as we can in the students. But I wonder, why doesn't anyone talk to the kids about loving God? And being a public school, as you can well imagine, my hands are tied. And I ask them questions like, recently we are working on solar system, and I asked them, these are 9th graders, 14-year-olds, and I asked them, so how was the solar system formed? And they all shout out, God made it. And this is their common response to pretty much anything I ask them. And I wish I could take them a little further on that, but all I say is, yes, I know God made everything, including the solar system, but how did God make it is my question. So anyways, we don't talk enough about loving God, about bringing God's actual presence in our lives. I feel that's a lack I feel that we can overcome. But why is it important to love God? Because, imagine if you've been to India and if you've been to a place called Haldar, I don't know how many of you have been there, but it's where the Ganges, the river Ganges, the mighty Ganges, is just starting out. And so it's still big at that point, but not as wide and not as calm as it would become in the plains. And it has a lot of current in it. And Ganges is supposed to be very pure, and you go and take a dip in that icy cold water. But what they have done is, so that people don't get swept away in the current, they have these poles and they have chains connected to it. And so you actually have to hold on to that chain to take a dip. And I like visualization, and pictures come to me easy. And I was thinking, life is, just imagine that point. I like to go back when I was just born. So just imagine for a minute. You were just born. You've just come to this world. Do you know anyone? You're being held. Surely somebody is looking at you with loving eyes, but do you know that person? You don't yet. You have no one in this world. You have not made any association, no family, no friends, no one. Who was there with you at that point? there must be someone. That was God. We came with him, we came from him, we are with him, and we will go back to him. And imagine all these different lifetimes of changing scenarios. This lifetime, I have a husband, I have 2 daughters. Who knows what I had last lifetime? Which family, what friends, what association, and millions of them. So imagine, I feel this is like a torrent of that stream going past me and just kind of washes me with it, because my mind can't take all this changing scenarios. And I need some constancy. And that's my chain. I hold on to that chain, and that's God. And without that, we just flow by, and life after life comes. And we know, I know that you know, and I know, and we all know life is a school. We keep coming back. We keep coming back to this world so that we learn the lessons. And, I was thinking, like the kindergarten kid, the first day in school, they're very excited, they come, and then they forget, and we forget, what did we come here for? And we forget about all that, and it's time to go home now. Okay, one life gone. And then we try it again, and again, and again, and again, and then finally we get it right at some point, okay. And then God does send us helpers to help us to remind. Remember how Paramahansa Yogananda, if you read his childhood book, actually it's not written by him, by his brother Mejda. I recommend that book highly if you haven't read it. It's by his brother, and it's called Mejda. And it talks a little, very, very sweet stories all throughout his lifetime, as the little brother saw the older brother. And so here is Paramahansa Yogananda. He's, I think, not even in his teens, he's probably 8 or 9, and he's playing with his little brother, and he's on his way back home, and they had this game. I think they liked to pluck these fruits from other people's trees as they went back home, and it's kind of getting dark, and then they see a person. All of a sudden, he just manifests, and he's glowing with light, and they stare at him, and it was Lahiri Mahashai who came to remind him that Mukunda, that was his name, don't forget, what are you here for? And Master was a self-realized soul, and even he needed that reminder. And they come back home, and they see the picture. The little brother sees the picture of Lahiri Mahashai, and he realizes that was Lahiri Mahashai. And even we get reminders like that in our life. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't. But talking of how high we should aspire, so, imagine a garden. To start off a garden, we have to have good soil. We have to get rid of the weeds. We have to put the little bulbs that we want to become flower plants in our garden. So I'm talking of virtues and vices. Yes, we have to replace the vices with virtues, right? We have to replace our laziness in the morning with full of energy up, and we have to go up and do our energization and do meditation. When we are being dishonest with ourselves or with other people, we have to replace that with honesty, integrity. These are all good things. But like Vivekananda said, he said, when you have a thorn in your foot, you need another thorn to take it out. There's no other way you can take a thorn out. You need something sharp to take it out. So he said, get rid of the thorn, the rusty thorn of bad karma with the golden thorn of good karma, but then throw both the thorns away. Because what are we aspiring towards? Just good karma? What will good karma give us? Sure, it'll give us a good life, good later on lives, good time up in the astral plane perhaps, 500 years of very joyful existence, blissful existence in the astral plane. Okay, but then what after that 500 years? If we haven't learned our lesson, if we haven't graduated, we have to come back to school again. And so, yes, good karma is good, but we have to transcend that. And that's where the love of God comes. Remember, we started off saying the whole spiritual path is about squishing the ego. How do we do that? It's a very tough thing. We have, for years, for lifetimes, we have nurtured that ego. And it's a huge, strong thing. And I'm speaking for myself. When I'm here, when I'm nervous to talk at a lecture at Sunday service, that's because my ego is telling me, maybe, what will the other people think of me? Will I be good enough? And I'm sure we all have been in situations like this where the ego is so strong in you. But you know what? When I squish that out with the thought of, I don't matter here. It's about you, and I'm just giving you a personal experience I had this morning. It's about you, all of you, and God. And I'm just a willing channel. And I really don't matter. I really don't. And so love of God. When we stop, all our problems in our life starts with the little M and E, me. Somehow in all the sentences in our lives that, whatever is, let's say you got offended by something, that's a good time to stop and think, what offended me? Anytime we get offended by anything. Because as Master Paramahansa Yogananda says, there is no situation that's either positive or negative. In other words, there's nothing that can offend you, really. Good time to stop and think, what offended me exactly? And you will, if you're honestly looking at it, you will find that pinpoint of ego that is getting offended by something that something else does. And Swamiji says it's usually a characteristic that we are trying to overcome in ourselves. If you're really offended at something someone else did, it's something to look into ourselves. If somebody's dishonesty really agitates us, dishonesty is not a good feature, I agree. It's a vice. But we should be able to see it just as a characteristic, and how we can help that person perhaps to overcome that. We shouldn't be agitated by that. So anyways, any agitation is a sign of the ego working in us. Where do we go from here? Love God. Just love God. There was the story of a person who came to Yogananda and he asked these really big, winded questions, philosophical questions about this, and this. And Master just listened for a while and he said, love God. And then this guy was completely perplexed. He didn't get his answer. So he tried one more time, using a different sentence maybe this time. And he asked again, and Master firmly said, love God. And then he still didn't understand. He was probably thinking, gosh, what's wrong with these masters? Maybe he didn't understand my question. I'm going to try it one more time. And a third time he asked, and Master said, love God. And he just walked away. And we don't know if that guy really got it or not, but what he's trying to say is that every answer to all our problems in life can be solved if we can learn to love God. Why? Because the ego and God cannot be in the same place. We are told the path is too narrow. The moment I, Padma, steps in a big way, God steps out. So we have to, it kind of goes hand in hand. And so it kind of works backwards too. You see the logic? If we love God more and more, more deeply, more perfectly, the ego is bound to get diminished little by little. As to perfecting ourselves, the virtues and the vices we were talking about, there are so many of them. We are told vices are in thousands, which is why, if you know about the Bhagavad Gita, it's a battlefield, and there are two sides that are fighting each other, two cousins actually, two brothers. And then there are thousands in one end, which is the vice side, and the virtue is just the 5 Pandava brothers, which tells us virtues are less in number, vices are a lot more. And so how do we get about? Is it worth wasting our time kind of tackling every vice? Maybe not. Maybe there's an easier way out. Swami Kriyananda gives us this visualization, like you're trying to sink a cloth in the water, and a part bubbles up, and then you press it down, another bubbles up, and you press that down, and a third one comes up, and it's an unending process. Where do we start? We can start right by loving God. The more we perfect that, the more we find that we are getting perfect in ourselves. As we become more willing channels of that light actually changes us. And it's so much easier that way, instead of having to think about, unless a particular, of course, I'm not, suggesting that a particular vice that is really preventing you so much, yes, you have to tackle it. But my suggestion is an experiment, maybe we could all do, is anything that is a big hurdle in our lives, try to bring God into it, into the picture, in a big way, in a big way. And Master talked about, how most people, remember I talked about the worldly people and the devotee. There are good worldly people, very virtuous worldly people. But at the end of it, what do virtues give us? What does success in any point of our lives give us? Think about those really successful composers, artists, painters, even on the science field, scientists. These are really very successful scientists, researchers. Are they really happy? Are they truly happy? Is that restless soul, is that rest? I don't think so. This is a saint has said once that, Lord, you have made us for thyself, and our souls are restless till they find their rest in thee. Our souls are restless till we find our real home in God. So we could be perfecting ourselves in any aspects of our lives, but we still wouldn't find that satisfaction, that extreme super satisfaction, which can only be found when we bring God into our lives. And how do we love God? I know we are all trying to love Him, and we are trying to perfect our love for Him more and more. How do we do it? I was thinking, well, we can start our day and end our day and try as much as we can to bring Him in everything that we do. If I'm a mother and when I'm helping my kids do homework, maybe I can think of Him and see Him in my children. When I'm talking to my students in my classroom, again, think of Him. The challenge is to remember to think of Him. But the more we try, it's just like anything else. It needs practice. And just like learning, you can't expect to learn to play the piano on the very first day, right? So we just keep little things. People do little things, I know, that inspire me. Little slips on the table or with names written, maybe of your guru, maybe just God, or remember God. Little notes, you take breaks, you take a walk, bring Him with you. You're washing the dishes, do it for Him. When I cook, I always remember my guru, and because he said, cooking is a very powerful medium. Food is a very powerful medium of sending vibrations. And so when I cook, I always consciously try to bring his vibration into the food and send that blessing as people will be eating the food, as sharing his blessings with all. So in this little, and we can be creative. In these little ways, as we are look at it this way, as you're putting more and more attention on God, we are moving our attention from ourselves. Every time you feel something pulling you down, bring Him in, ask Him. Little things like, which cereal am I going to choose this morning? God, which cereal am I going to eat this morning? Okay, help me choose one. And the more we continue this conversation with Him, the more stronger His response becomes. He's our beloved. Can you imagine any beloved that we don't want to communicate with Him? We don't want to talk with Him? And we just simply talk and then we don't listen? What kind of communication is that, right? So we have to bring up this two-way communication. And we find that as we do this more and more, life becomes so beautiful. It becomes so joyful. It really finally finds its true meaning. And our souls finally rest in Him. And I was thinking of this very beautiful, I'm sure a lot of you know this story, and there's no harm in repeating it. This is a story about a person who was, I think he was diagnosed with some kind of disease that doctors gave him 6 months of lifetime. And he decided that he's going to spend those 6 months trying to be as much as with God as possible. And so he took up meditation. His diseased body wouldn't let him sit for very long in the beginning, but he trained the body. And he would be meditating for 15 minutes at first, and then 30 minutes, hours. 3 months passed, he's meditating much longer now, and then 6 months came and went. And the doctors had predicted his life for 6 months only, but it came and went. He's meditating for long hours by now. And then years passed, and one day he was uplifted in that light, and he was one with God, and he saw God's light, God's words in light written on in his inner eye, and he saw God saying, I think he says, I've come to this body. And then the devotee says, but Lord, and then I'm sorry, I forgot this very important part, is that he used to pray when he was meditating, he used to pray, Lord, come into this broken temple of mine. He used to keep praying that, Lord, come into this broken temple of mine. And then one day he's uplifted into that light, and in the light he sees written, I've come into this body and you are healed. And he says, but Lord, I didn't ask you to heal me. I asked you to just come into this broken temple. And the Lord replies, where I am, there cannot be any imperfection. Once I am here, it has to be perfect. It's whole. And that's what we should remember. The more we bring God into our life, everything just fits in. And people might be saying otherwise to us. They might say, you're so impractical. Don't listen to that. Listen to your soul. Our soul, our intuition is our power, is our tool of knowing God. And the more we tune into that, the more we'll be driven towards Him. And then this little cup, once Swami Kriyananda asked, I think told Master, that teach me to love you as much as you love me. And Master replied, how can this little cup hold the ocean? Meaning, you will one day, but right now you're a little cup. So we are all the little cups right now. But the more we love God, the more we bring Him in more actively, more energetically, we'll find ourselves expanding. And the little cup is expanding. And at some point it expands so much with that love for God that the cup has to break. And then we'll be like that little bottle that has the water inside it and is bobbing in the ocean. And the bottle breaks. And the water merges back into the ocean. And as we expand more and more, we will be one with God, which is our true home. And only then our soul will know true peace. And we'll be soaring in these skies of omnipresence, of everlasting peace, love, and joy.
Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your